Hi guys, welcome to your first Excel workshop. This week we're going to talk about how to handle and summarize categorical data using the data that you collected a few weeks ago in your data collection valley. Now what I have here and what you should have in front of you as well is the full data set that we collected a few weeks back, and I'm on the tab for the questionnaire data. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with today because that's where we have categorical data. Now at first I want to talk to you about a few principles of how Excel works. First of all, that Excel works using a coordinate system, a little bit like battleships. So you have columns which are named in letters A, B, C, D, and so on. And then you have rows which are named in numbers 1 through 2, however many rows of data you've collected. And so, like I said, a little bit like in Battleship or in a map, sometimes you find the same system. If you look at cell column D and then cell 6, that over here, that would be cell D6. Okay, so you have essentially a position of the different cells, and then you also have the content that's in the cells. So cell D6 says slightly agree, and cell C6 says the number 5, and so on. And essentially that's all Excel needs to do everything it wants to do with the data that we input, is it needs to know where the information is and what information there is. So the content as well as the position of the cells. The other important thing is that when it comes to data storage, which is what Excel is used for, we have a principle in which we utilize the columns, okay, so these vertical ones here, to store variables. So for example here it's which workshop did this person belong to. And then in the rows we have individual data points. So for this person right here, respondent number 2, which was asked these 2 questions by a group of students from workshop A, and they were in group A on the day. And this is the 2 answers that they gave to the questionnaire. And that's how Excel should be organized, or how we should organize data in Excel. That columns represent variables and rows represent individual data points. Okay? So all the information that we've collected on this one person should be in a row, and the columns represent the different bits of information that we have on that person. Okay, from there, I just want to do a really quick recap on types of data, and I want to know from you, before we keep going with a few functions and things to do in Excel, what kind of data is shown in columns D and E. Okay, so we have the answer of people to the question of how much they agree on a scale of 1 to 5 with the statement that your individual actions can have an impact on the climate crisis. And in column E, we have the answer of all of these people here to the question of what kind of diet preference or requirements they have. So I'll pause the video here and I'd like you to answer that question of what kind of data are these, and then we will continue from there. Okay, so hopefully you have identified correctly that column D, the answers of people to question 1 about the impacts of their actions on the climate crisis, is ordinal data, because there is a natural hierarchy to the different categories of how much people agree with that statement. Whereas in column E, we have the answer to question 2 about diet preference, and there is no hierarchy between those different categories, and therefore that data is nominal. Okay, so what you have here is all of the data collected by everyone who's in my group, as well as everyone who's in Nathan's group. And as you can see, some groups were either not present or they didn't input the data. There's quite a lot of blank spaces here. Or maybe there was a group assigned, but there weren't actually that many people there, so we didn't need that group. And so there's some empty data here. That might not usually happen when you're collecting data for a research project, but it can happen sometimes that you have to delete and get rid of some bits of information just because they don't pertain to your research. Something went wrong there, or for some other reason you need to exclude something. And that's the first thing I want to show you, is how to delete data. And obviously you've got all of these bits here of empty spaces dotted around, and the easiest way to delete them is to have them all in one place, because otherwise there is a danger that you'll overlook something. And in order to get everything into one place, we need to sort the data. Now remember that all of these different columns and the information that is in them represent the information we collected on each person, which is in a row, and we cannot disconnect those bits of information. Okay, so this row here always has to stay together in that order. We have to have this bit of information next to this, next to this, next to this. And in order to avoid changing that, we need to organize all of the data together. Okay, so when you sort data sets, you should always sort all of the columns together. One way of highlighting data in Excel is to just hover over the first cell in the range that you want to highlight. Make sure you're in the middle of the cell, not on the outside of the cell where you get this symbol, which lets you move the cell to a different location. So I could move that whole cell over here. That one's now empty, and I've moved the contents over into cell G6 instead. I don't want to do that. The other thing you also don't want to do is to drag this little plus sign, which occurs when you hover over this little box in the bottom right corner, because that moves the whole function or whatever is in the cells across to all of the other cells that you're highlighting. We also don't want to do that, but we will learn about how that might be useful later on. What we want to do is just make sure we're in the middle of the cell, and then we want to click the cursor down, hold it down, and then just drag the mouse across the whole range of what we want to highlight. Okay, so that's one way of doing it, and you just go all the way down till you get to the last row that has anything in it, okay, which would be over here. Now we've highlighted all of it. That's one way, or you can also just hover over the letters that tell you which columns you've got up here, the A, the B, the C, until you get this little arrow that points all the way down the column. You click on the first one, hold the cursor down, drag it across, and then it is automatically highlighted the whole of that column all the way down, even with the empty cells. Okay, once you've highlighted everything, we now want to organize the data by the contents that we're interested in. Now the empty cells, the gaps, are in these answers here, and so this is what we want to use to organize the data. It also means that we will get the different types of answers, the different categories, all in the same place in a bulk. And how that works, I'll show you in just a second. So we want to be in the Home tab up here, and then we want to go to Sort and Filter, and then Custom Sort. And this little pop-up window lets us now tell Excel what we want to sort and in which way. First of all, you have to always ensure that if you do have headers, this box here is ticked, My Data has headers. That basically tells Excel that this first row here is just the names of your variables. It's not part of the data. If I untick it, it includes these rows as data, which we don't want. Okay, so that wants to be ticked. And then in this field here, you can select which column, so which variable you want to sort your data by. And in this case, we want to do that first by answer 1. And we want to do that in alphabetical order, so we leave this here. We could also reverse that and organize from Z to A, but we don't want to do that at this point in time. So if we now click OK, what we have now is the actual rows, the information about each person, have stayed together. Okay, so the only thing that has changed is that we've taken this whole row and we have moved it up and down so that all of the people that have answered question 1 with agree appear together at the start of our data set. Okay, that's all that's happened. And now we can see how many of those there are. And if we go all the way to the bottom, we can see all of the cells which have remained empty. Okay, so right here we've got all of the ones where the groups have either not been there or they didn't enter the data. And we can delete that now just to tidy up our data set a little bit. Now, when it comes to deleting, there's several ways of doing that. And as I mentioned before, Excel has two bits of information. It has the cell location and it has the content of the cell. And those are the two things that you can delete. If I just highlight a bunch of these cells and I press delete on my keyboard, it will delete the content of the cells, but the position will stay the same. However, if I do the same, but I actually right-click into this selection and I click delete here, it then wants to delete the cells themselves, and it wants to know what to do with the cells which are underneath. In this case, I will let Excel shift them up. And that means whatever was down here before is now up here. Okay, that's the difference. And those things can be handy in different situations. Right now, because this is at the end of our data and it doesn't affect anything, we can just delete the contents, delete on my keyboard, and it's gone. And now we only have data left which we can actually utilize. Okay, so this is just the first part of what I wanted to do with you. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to now get an overview of how many times each of these different answers occurred in our data set. Okay, so open the next video and we will go from there.